And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Taluki, and on today's episode, we've got three things to discuss, three main things here. First, I want to discuss the Dan Campbell interview that was on this Pardon My Take podcast. It was a long interview, and I thought there were some interesting points that the new Lions head coach made. We'll break that down for you. And then also, Tigers are starting to get hot, winning 5 of 7. Is this something to really cheer about, or is this something just to put to the Bayside and, I guess get to the reality of this team that maybe they're not as good as some people, maybe had them out to be in terms of the prospects and all the new guys up as of now. Also, two basketball players making the Basketball Hall of Fame with Michigan connections. We're going to break that down for you and see if they're really deserving of their Hall of Fame status or not. We'll have to see a little bit later on, but thank you again, folks, for tuning in as always. Hope everybody had a great weekend out there and really enjoyed this nice weather. After all that snow we got earlier in May, snow on opening day, all that in April, finally I'm able to wear shorts and a t-shirt and sandals, all that outside, and it makes me feel really, really good that we're able to do that and really enjoy this nice weather. I was able to play a lot of golf this weekend when I wasn't doing the captain's games, the Lake County captain's games, helping out with that. I was able to walk a lot of holes and walk. I'll tell you what, walking in golf is nice. You get your exercise in. You don't have to worry about a cart and all that, paying the extra cart fee. You just walk. You have your push cart with you, and you get a lot of nice exercise. It gets a little tiring, especially towards the end if you're walking 18. But other than that, it's really, really solid. In my opinion, it's a great way to exercise for sure. All right, I want to start off with Dan Campbell. Now, he was on this Pardon My Take podcast, and this is with Barstool Sports, and I'm just got to say, I'm not really a big Barstool Sports fan. I don't really pay attention much to their content, but I have a lot of buddies that are really, really into it, and one of my buddies texted me, and he says, "No, you gotta listen to this Dan Campbell interview." So, I'm like, all right, fine. Anytime the Danimal speaks, it's like a whole flock of people just come to listen because, you could always get a great soundbite out of Dan, and I just love it. I love it out of him. I love how, this is the character of this team and how the city is and the team is portraying itself to match with the city, that blue-collar attitude. I really, really like that with Dan Campbell, and everything has been good so far. But every time I listen to an interview with this guy, I always learn something new about him. I didn't know, and I don't want to spoil the whole interview. You can go on Pardon My Take and listen to this. But I did learn, hey, he grew up on a cattle ranch in Texas. His dad was a Marine. I'm sure he was instilled toughness right there if his dad was a Marine. Growing up on a cattle ranch, farm work, farm labor, all that. He had that toughness in him. I can see from his roots, just based on his roots, what he was talking about at the beginning of the interview, that, how he wants to mold this team like that blue collar. He's had it since birth, basically. Something I really noticed, too, and, I think I've talked about this ever since he was hired, really, really feels like he speaks from the heart, very authentic, and I think players really want to play for somebody that's authentic. And I think that his approach to this is something that can sell the players. Now, if you look at the previous regime with Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, I didn't get a sense that there was something, authentic with that. It seemed like they were all wannabes, Patriot wannabes. It didn't seem like they were their true selves with the Lions. Something was a little off. And maybe it was their true selves. Who knows? But at least Dan Campbell, it seems like it's his true version of himself, and he's authentic, and that's what I like about it. I like that, and I like that whole sense that he had in every interview he's done. He addressed the biting kneecaps stuff as well, and it's just trying to basically, obviously he doesn't mean biting kneecaps off, but it's just an identity. And I really, really think that that's very important for this team. All right, so one of the other points that he made as well that I thought was interesting was that it's the team that makes these moves. So what I mean by that is going with Brad Holmes and all this experience that he has on the coaching staff. There's no ego here. That's what this shows me, that he's willing to work with Sheila, Chris Spielman, Brad Holmes. He's willing to work with all these people. And I think that's what the problem was with previous regimes, is that everybody kind of had their own agenda. Everybody kind of had their own way of thinking about what was going to happen. I mean, you think of recently, Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn with Jeff Okudah. The whole rumor was that nobody really wanted Jeff Okudah, except for one guy, Bob Quinn. Matt Patricia wanted Derek Brown from Auburn. The scouts wanted Tua from Alabama. And nobody wanted Jeff Okudah except Bob Quinn. And basically with his ego, at least seemingly, according to these rumors, he wanted that guy Okudah, and that was it. No input from anyone else. You go back to a famous Matt Millen story back in 2005 with DeMarcus Ware. Everybody in the room had talked all up to the draft about how DeMarcus Ware was going to fit their scheme and he was going to be a monster as a pass rusher. Then all of a sudden, at the last minute, Matt Millen starts changing his mind and thinking, we could really pair a wide receiver with Roy Williams, have a really potent offense. And I believe they took Mike Williams, one of the biggest busts of a receiver probably in recent memory in the NFL draft. So that's when I think a little bit of ego gets in to it. It's just a little bit of me agenda. And from what this Dan Campbell interview sounded like, they all want to work in unison. They're all going to go down with the ship. Some disagreement might happen, but that's okay. As long as a collective unit, they agree, as the majority, and they're doing what's right for the organization, for the team. And I really, really like what Dan Campbell and that approach was, especially from previous history with Millen and Patricia, like I mentioned earlier. Also, so I thought it was interesting about the draft as well. So, they talked about Sewell. And by the way, and I've mentioned this before, Sewell is just the definition of Chris Spielman and, Dan Campbell. They're what they want in this football team and on the trenches. He always believes in winning and losing in the trenches. Is that something that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn believed in? I don't know. If they believed in that, they might not have taken Okudah at 3 last year. And some of the other guys that they've taken in the past, like running backs. They wanted the best player available on the board. And I thought it was interesting, too. You can't get tied to need a lot. That's what he was saying. You can't get tied to, this is the player that we need. A lot of times it just has to be the best player available. And obviously they didn't, and, everybody sees that their reaction of how pumped they were and everything, and rightfully so. He admitted they didn't think Sewell would fall like this. They were prepared to take a receiver. Kind of that best available thing as well. If Sewell's not going to be there, the next best player that's available is a wide receiver. But no, that's not how it ended up. Sewell was by far the best player available at number 7, and they were able to take that. I like it, and I like this approach that they don't have to fall to need when they get into that crunch situation. When their guy is there, they're not tempted to go anywhere else. I like that, especially in the first year draft. All right, the final thing I really wanted to talk about with Dan Campbell, and like I said, I don't want to spoil the whole interview. I'll let you go listen to that on Pardon My Take. Talking about flushing the turds down. He doesn't want any turds on this football team. I was laughing when I heard that. Just the whole turds on the foot. Just listening to that was really funny. And I guess his definition of turds is something like players that don't like football, get in trouble off the field, one of those kind of guys. And he actually said Patricia and Quinn, surprisingly, they didn't really bring many turds in. Now, you might think of that as, okay, well, maybe your definition of a turd is a guy that just is not good at his job. But I can see where Campbell's coming from, because what was it when Martha was owner and all that? What was the Lions team? They were boring. They didn't hire any, characters. They didn't sign any players with character issues or guys with a bunch of question marks and all that. Maybe in different aspects, like on the maybe play, but it was never off the field or character issues. I could totally see where Dan Campbell's coming from. To be honest, I kind of agree with him. I think Matt Quinn and Bob Patricia did a good job of at least keeping those guys out of the football team. Because those guys with character issues, guys that don't want to be there, don't want to play football, those guys can be cancer to your football team. And, I know there was a lot of other factors that got into it with Patricia and Bob Quinn. I'm not saying that, they should have been good because of this. No. And this does not really, just because you're a bad football player doesn't mean you're a bad person or you have character issues and all that. No. I get it. The classy guys, I understand. They just weren't, they didn't fit into that scheme or, they weren't big enough to play this position or, whatever. They had injury problems. But I can see where Dan Campbell's coming through on this, and I think it was a very interesting point for sure. Like I said, go listen to it. Pardon my take. I don't listen to the podcast. That's actually the first time I've ever listened to it, really. But I know they've interviewed Dan Campbell. My guy Brandon Staley, former John Carroll Blue Streak just a few years ago, he was interviewed, the head coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. By the way, I think he's going to be an excellent, excellent head coach one day. So, and I think he's really going to thrive with the Chargers down there in L.A. So definitely go check that out. But definitely, I just wanted to share my thoughts with the Dan Campbell interview for sure. All right, we haven't talked about the Tigers in a while, and I think I got to bring them up because, obviously it was just an atrocious start. At first it looked like there was some promising signs, especially against the Tribe at the beginning of the year, and it just seemed to just kind of completely just downfall spiral. At the beginning if you look at the beginning of the month, they lost. What was it? They lost the Yankees twice. They lost 2 of 3 to the Red Sox. Same kind of thing with the Twins. But then all of a sudden, last week, they started kind of catching fire. They won on a big walk-off against the Royals 8-7. Then the 4-2, and they swept the Royals Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then, they beat the Cubs 9-8 on Saturday, lost 2 of 3 to them. And then they beat the Mariners on Monday the 17th, 4-1 in Seattle. Currently, at the time of this recording, it's 2-0 Detroit in Seattle. So, look, I'm not... And the main thing I bring up with this is I don't like... Look, it's fun, especially for a team that doesn't have the talent like Detroit does. It's fun when they go on these little streaks. Does it mean anything? No, probably not. But, hey, for a team that's well out of first place, it's fun to see that. Plus, what I think of this is as, especially, it's just confidence boosters for the young guys. Look at Casey Mize. The other night, he pitched pretty well in that 4-1 victory over Seattle. This is a guy that's, he's been struggling a little bit to adjust to the big leagues. And to get a start under his belt, where he has some confidence, a confidence booster, that's fine. I don't mind that. It's the same with Tarek Skubal. Those other guys. Those guys aren't prospects anymore, but some of these other guys, they're more on that side. You think of, and speaking of prospects, and with the Lake County Captains, they're in the same league as West Michigan, so I'm going to see West Michigan next week. I'm excited to see Spencer Torkelson. I want to see, and I've heard, because, we give live score updates during the games. He's really, really struggled. Now, it seems like in the last couple games, he has started turning on a little bit. But, for a guy that's 21 years old, coming right from college, and I know last year was a fluky year because there was no, minor league season. You'd think a guy like that would be a little more ready to go. But, it's a little slow start. But it's just some of these guys, I just wonder if the Tigers are rushing them through the system a little bit. Riley Green's already up at Double-A with Erie. I don't think he's doing, astronomically well. I know in rookie ball he was just, blowing everybody away. Torkelson hasn't really done much. I talked about Mize and Skubal earlier. While they have some nice starts here and there, are they consistent? Not really. Were these guys rushed up? I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the Tigers right now, especially on Torkelson and Green. Because if these guys don't pan out, Al Avila should be fired. And that's my opinion. Because, look, Dave Dombrowski, he left. He went to Boston. They hired Al Avila. Okay. From that point on, pretty much, and around the JV, Justin Upton trades, around that time is when everything, that was when they officially kind of kicked it into rebuild. Oh, heck, speaking of the JV trade, how about the Tigers getting rid of Franklin Perez? Wow. I mean, this is a guy that was one of the centerpieces around that trade. Hey, the Tigers are getting a decent prospect from Houston along with Jake Rogers, all those guys. And then Houston goes and wins a World Series. Franklin Perez, a guy that really struggled with injuries, big-time injuries over the last couple years, just could never really stay healthy. He was a top prospect in the Tigers organization for a while. I think I believe he was top 5. He's barely pitched over the last 2-3 seasons. That's one off the board, Al. Who's next? Is Torkelson going to pan out? Is Riley Green going to pan out? I think, in my opinion, Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green have to be superstars. They can't just be, average players. If these guys aren't superstars, I don't know, unless the Tigers start spending money like I thought they would. Doesn't seem like it at this point. Everything right now is about the prospects. And hopefully Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal can settle in. And that's another. Where is Matt Manning? Where is Matt Manning? Why isn't he up right now? This guy, Matt Manning's 23 years old. He's not a baby. He's not 18 years old. Where is he? I don't want to hear about service time and all that. They did that with Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal last year. If we want to develop these guys, where is Matt Manning? I'd say the same thing about Alex Faedo, but he had Tommy John surgery. That's a whole different thing. If these guys are really that good, why aren't they coming up right now? Where's Matt Manning? How long is it going to take till Riley Green comes? At this rate, it seems like next year for Torkelson and Green. I'd like to see if maybe they get some swings, especially at the end of the year. Right now, it's just about getting the young guys' confidence up. And, Miggy? Oh, man. Miggy has not had a good start to the season after that home run against the Indians on opening day. Not much. Not much. With the Angels releasing Albert Pujols and signing with the Dodgers, Miggy could be next. He could be signing with a playoff contender team, trying to get one more ring kind of thing. We'll see, though. I know that's a big part of the contract somebody would have to eat up. But who knows? He could be next. Just a little update on the Tigers. Haven't really done it in a while, so I thought about bringing that up for sure. All right. Last piece of the agenda, if you will, for the podcast tonight. 2 Michigan basketball legends have been inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. One is one of the centerpieces around the going to work era of the Pistons in the 2000s. It is Ben Wallace, Big Ben, Fear the Fro. The other one is Chris Webber, of course, the pride of Detroit Country Day, star at the University of Michigan, and went on to have a successful NBA career. But Ben Wallace, I thought that was interesting. This was an interesting move for Hall of Fame. I saw the report and I thought, really? Ben Wallace? Interesting. And by the way, speaking of Ben Wallace, I still have my afro that Ben Wallace, because I have curly hair. And I remember my uncle when I was a kid, 4 or 5 years old, he bought me a Big Ben afro because, I had a fro as a kid with all my curls. And just to add to that fro, and I remember he got me the t-shirt and everything. I remember I wore that wig everywhere. Because my dad and I, back when the Pistons were on my TV 20, before Fox Sports Detroit, Bally Sports, whatever it is now, we used to watch those Pistons games. So I remember Big Ben. I mean, not a lot, because my memory kind of fades, when I was that young. But I do remember seeing some of Big Ben, and he was. I'll tell you what. And the reason I thought it was interesting, it's got nothing to do with his defense. His defense alone, is now if they had a Hall of Fame for defense, he'd be first ballot Hall of Famer. What I don't understand though is his offense. He did nothing offensively, basically. This is a guy that averaged 5.7 points a game in his entire career. He had a career high 9.7 points per game with Detroit in 04-05 when they lost to the Spurs in the championship. So, the offensive production was never there. This guy was a rebounding machine. 9.6 rebounds a game, 2 blocks a game, just over a steal a game. But it just offensively, he didn't really give you much, but it was the defense that that really showcased it. And this was a guy, he was really the definition of going to work. This is a guy that went to Virginia Union and first undrafted player to ever be elected into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And that's impressive in itself. And being able to make all those NBA teams, second, third team, all NBA, 3-time second team, 2-time third team, 5-time first team all defensive, 4-time defensive player of the year. Kind of similar to Rodman in terms of defense. I think Rodman gave you a little bit more offense though. But still, I was a little surprised. I was. And in the end, does Ben deserve it? Look, I know he didn't give you much offensively, but defense, this is a guy that was 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", somewhere in there. And he just balled out every single game. He was so athletic. This guy, that's a small forward in the NBA, basically. But this guy was playing center just because of how athletic he was, how he could jump up there, block those shots. It was, for who he was and where he came from, undrafted, Virginia Union. Played at Cuyahoga Community College up here in Cleveland for a little bit. For where he came from and what he achieved in the NBA, that story itself should be in the Hall of Fame. So overall, yes, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to put Big Ben in the Hall of Fame. Now, is that a first ballot? I don't think so. He wasn't first ballot. But, I definitely think overall, Big Ben probably deserves it. Just based on that defense. He was just incredible. Incredible on defense. I know Mike Valeni was talking about Dikembe Mutombo, kind of comparing Ben, but except he was like, no, Dikembe gave you way more production on offense than Big Ben did. That's what I was thinking about that, and I thought, yeah, he didn't really give you much offensively. But the defense, I think that just spoke volumes. And especially, for a team going to work. A guy with pretty much no superstars. Just a bunch of guys that were cast-offs from other teams, just bonded together, were able to win that championship. They're the only team in NBA history to win a championship without a current, future, or past MVP on its team. The going-to-work Pistons in 2004, and then the 1989-90 Bad Boys, those two teams. The only 3 teams in NBA history with no past, present, or current or future MVP. Unbelievable. And that's the reason why a lot of those teams are probably underrated. For sure. I did want to talk a little bit about Chris Webber. Now, Chris Webber definitely, in terms of offense, he's got way more production than Big Ben. 5-time NBA All-Star, made 1 NBA first team, 3-time All-NBA second team. He did make a third team as well, was the Rookie of the Year in 1994. And his number 4 is retired by the Sacramento Kings. Forgot to say, Big Ben's number is also retired by the Pistons. And also, too, the Naismith Hall of Fame, that's not only for your NBA career. You got to remember, there's other factors into the Naismith Hall of Fame. You look at, there's all kinds of college coaches in there. I mean, Tom Izzo's in it. Tom Izzo has never coached a game in the NBA. Chris Webber, I mean, just based on his 2 years at Michigan, that might even put him in the Naismith Hall of Fame. I mean, did Christian Laettner had an average NBA career, but I mean, he's one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. He's in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. I don't mind Chris Webber being in it. In my opinion, he's probably waited a little too long. I mean, he was a dominant player in his prime. He just doesn't get the love that some other players do. But a very, very dominant big man and could really, really play that power forward center role just superbly. And the whole Fab Five thing, and it seems like that's gradually starting to replace. It's especially with Juwan Howard being the coach at Michigan now, and that whole Jalen Rose and Chris Webber on ESPN thing. Seems like everybody's reconciling. Looks like I'm hoping the Fab Five will come back. That'll be good for the sport. And Chris Webber getting into the Hall of Fame, I think, helps that. So we'll see what happens, but I think overall Chris Webber, Ben Wallace, deserving. And I know everybody complains about the NBA, they let everybody in, the Basketball Hall of Fame. It probably is the easiest Hall of Fame to get into. But, I mean, what can you do? What can you do? That'll do it for this episode of Open Mic Night. Make sure to check out all the other content on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I mean, there's the Fan Report. There's the Wrestling Podcast, the Doc and Jock Podcast, the Michigan Podcast. I mean, they're all awesome, awesome podcasts to listen to and very informative. And John McAroon, Adam Strozinski, they just do a great, great job with everything with the network and really starting it from the ground up. 2013, it's coming from the grassroots. And like I've said before, I'm really happy to be on the journey with all you guys with the podcast network and getting a lot of great guests on and all that. That is for sure. But make sure to join us next week. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of news with all the teams around here in Detroit. Make sure to join us next week only on Open Mic Night.